Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my good friends, John Gerard and Greg Sterling. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey,
Andy,
good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Our other good friend, the fourth, Neil Polachek, is not available today. So it's just going to be the three of us. Tons of stuff happened this week. Let's just go through a little rundown and then we'll jump into it. New video with Toys R Us and Sora, OpenAI, their new video AI platform. We'll dig into that. A Forrester Report on generative AI for marketing agencies. Claude just announced 3.5 Sonnet, which is their new LLM. Universal Music Group created this new partnership that we'll talk a little bit about, and AI websites. So let's jump into it. Let's talk a little bit about the Toys R Us promotional film that they created with Sora. Greg, you wanna lead off with that one?
This is a short film that tells a story based entirely on a text prompt featuring, the Jeffrey the giraffe, mascot of Toys R Us, which has now been sort of changed. It's been through several owners, I think, since its heyday. The theme of the video is Jeffrey the giraffe comes to this kid who's featured in the video in a dream, and does it use Sora? I'm not sure that it does. Oh, it does use Sora, right?
It uses Sora, yeah.
Yeah, that's the OpenAI platform. Right. So the thing that's kind of a breakthrough about this is that they created this kind of coherent narrative that Toys R Us felt strongly or good enough about to embrace. And it really seems like this is going to be a larger and larger part of at least commercial production, if not other kinds of longer form media ultimately. So it's pretty interesting. And what did you think of the video? Did you guys watch the video?
I did. I loved it. I thought it was really cool. The whole thing is AI generated.
Right, entirety, 100%.
Yeah. So it was done by an agency who had alpha access to the new Sora LLM, large language model, which is essentially where you can enter in text to tell the AI model what to do. Using AI, it renders the video in full motion video. No glitches. It was actually really surprising. I paused it and zoomed in a little bit to see the quality of even their people that get rendered in the video. I wanted to see what their skin quality looked like close up, and it's amazingly accurate. You can see freckles on the kid's face. The expressions on their faces are real. It's really impressive, this first wave of getting video out. And you can see where this is going to go. I mean, this is just the first, and it was a little over a minute long. But you can see where all this is going to go, where you just enter a prompt in, and within a short period of time, you're going to get a full length video out of that.
This is to some degree what the Hollywood writers' strike was about, the actors and the writers.
Definitely.
Yeah, right.
It's hard to know how much of the sentiment out there that's panning the short film is coming from people who are about to get disrupted by what's going on. But the other kind of interesting thing. I mean, I think this is amazing. I think it's
totally amazing. It's totally amazing,
and it's unequivocal that the AI generated most of what we see in that. What's not clear, like if you read the fine print, is how much extra stuff the agency actually did to make it just right. And I don't know if they've gone so far as to sort of say what their prompt was. It wasn't quite hey, let me just put one prompt into Sora and get a 66-second perfectly formed video coming out the other side. So we don't really know how much extra, creative energy behind the scenes in terms of production went into sort of tuning what was created. And ultimately that may not matter, because this is sort of more of I don't want to call it a publicity stunt. It's a milestone, sort of a moment where, this is an actual commercial where, let's say 100% of the base content that was created for it, is coming from an AI. And that's just extraordinary.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I would imagine, I don't know this because I haven't seen the Sora interface yet, but I would imagine you have to feed some sort of imagery into the AI for it to be able to lock in on, who's Jeffrey the giraffe, for example, and get that right. So that when you're leveraging a large brand like Toys R Us or any large brand, they are very clear and careful about how you use assets, right? So, uploading.
In this case, they totally are behind it. They totally embraced it, right? They co-produced it. This wasn't something done for, on spec that they then said, hey, that's great. They were all in on this, it seems like.
That's my understanding as well. I mean, I think this was, and honestly, it's kind of brilliant for everybody involved. I don't know. The agency's probably getting some stuff around this. OpenAI. I mean, anybody, certainly of our generation, is going to have some sort of an affiliation with Toys R Us from a brand perspective. It's maybe a little bit of a tired brand these days. So this is like, hey, we're really cutting edge and
Yeah,
contemporary and hip and out on the bleeding edge. So it's kind of a nice like brand mashup, I think, as well.
On the brand
smart.
mashup side, I don't know if you caught this at the end, but they said that there's Toys R Us now in every Macy's. So I thought that's new. I
That's
wasn't expecting.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
store within a store.
yeah.
Yeah, it's astounding that you get this level of quality, and it's also amazing to think that this is really the 1.0 version of this. And so 5 years hence, 10 years hence, I mean, it's not inconceivable to imagine some AI generated script that's tweaked by a human, cut and paste into some UI, and then generates a a commercial or some longer form content on the basis of that script. And then you've got synthetic voices that are generated it simultaneously. So the whole thing more or less is created out of whole cloth and with some tweaks and some editorial intervention. But
Yeah.
I mean, this is straight line to that from
That's
this.
right. And by the way, here's something interesting that's happening. This is actually showing up in the development world as well. So one of the things that's driving that capability, or going to drive it soon, is this sort of planning capability that's getting layered in on the AI side. And what would that mean? Well, if I want a 10-minute short film, I wouldn't just say, have a prompt that says, "Hey, create me a 10-minute short film about a dragon and a puppy dog," and then expect that to sort of come out wholly formed. What would happen is it would go through and go, okay, first thing I'm going to do is create a storyboard. Then I'm going to create character sketches for each one of these. Then I'm going to create a script. And so there's this sort of planning capability where the AI creates the inputs for its next sort of creative endeavor, right? So then it would take the storyboard and the character sketches and say, great, now let's turn that into take this and turn that into a script. And then it would take the script and say, okay, now turn this into a shot by shot script with all the camera angle instructions. And then it would do that. And then it would send that to the video generation side to make everything hold together. So it's a really cool moment in AI that's sort of feeding into itself, which is pretty amazing.
Unless
It's
you're
totally.
a filmmaker or a writer or actor.
Yeah.
This is a good segue into the Universal Music item, Andy. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. So interesting announcement that just came out. I think it was yesterday or today, around Universal Music has signed a deal to train AI to make ultra high fidelity vocal models of the artists that have been signed on Universal Music. So what that means is that you could take John Bon Jovi's voice, for example, or anybody that's on Universal Music, and create a song using their voice, and they own the rights to that song and get paid on any kind of residuals that get paid from the licensing from that, which is interesting on the one hand. I've been hearing mixed feelings about this from other artists,
Totally. I
so
mean,
it's very
yeah. Go
controversial
ahead.
kind of a concept.
Well, I mean, are the artists aware that this is a provision in their agreement that the Universal can license their voice to some rando who's got a, in front of a
Who
screen
actually
and they're
gets
going to
paid?
create.
Does Universal Music get paid, or does the artist get paid, or both? Or
Well,
you know,
the artist probably gets some small amount of money, I would imagine, and I would think that a lot of these artists are not completely aware of these provisions, although maybe by analogy from the Hollywood stuff, they have sensitivity to it. But if I were John Bon Jovi or anybody, I wouldn't necessarily want some person out there in the world with or without talent using my voice to create a song that may or may not represent my values, creative aspirations, interests, aesthetic tastes, right? I mean, it's like that seems to me to be very problematic if you're somebody
If the
who
song
really
is John
takes.
Bon Jovi's a wimp or something, or like, something that's just really like,
Well, not
you
even,
artist.
like what if you're somebody who's not a fan of guns or whatever, and somebody comes out and says, I love Bruce Springsteen or something. I love
Yeah,
guns. Guns are great. More guns. 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 Guns.
exactly.
That sound. I mean, there's all kinds of potential problems that come with that kind of thing, and I think it's a little surprising to me that they're just open the floodgates.
I think here's my prediction on this. I think it's going to follow a similar path as all or many other like massively bleeding edge innovations that have occurred in the music space, and like the most recent example being the switch to streaming, right? So if we kind of all think back to that era, there was hesitancy from many artists and studios. Am I allow my stuff to go into streaming? And what I think happened was there's a whole bunch of people, there's like power law distribution in artist popularity. So the top 25 or 100 most popular artists have 80% or something or they have a higher percentage of the streaming than you would think, or just of listening. So there's a lot of holdouts in that top category because they want to retain their position in the top. Well, everybody else is like, you know what? I'm not in the top yet, so I'll just say yes to this. What the hell? What's the worst that could happen? And the question is going to be like, how far down that curve do you have to go before you get people that say, yeah, look, man, let's just take a shot. Like, I'm not Bon Jovi, but maybe this will help me become that. And so the combination, you get all those people saying yes to it, and then you get one or two or three people who get paid a ton of money in that top 100 group to go to sign up and say, sure, I'll do it. And they get paid something absurd. And that becomes then the tipping point where, people can't not do it at some point.
That makes a ton of sense, unless they already gave away their rights, in which
That's
case,
already done.
I would say, maybe not with their name and likeness, right?
Likeness. That's
Likeness is a really broad concept in this case.
yeah, if that's part of the traditional, kind of rights that get exchanged when you're doing a deal with the devil. I mean, the recording studio.
Yeah, yeah. Well, people are so desperate to make money now in any way they can, right? I mean, the whole nature of the music business has been, irrevocably altered by streaming and Spotify and all these music services, and people don't buy music anymore in the way that they used to.
It does feel like a desperate grab. Like they're trying to be innovative, but it does feel like a desperate grab to just grab some money. And
So here's one other kind of contrarian idea, which would be like, since so much of making money as an artist has now moved to live shows, I wonder if this could be seen as a way to like actually generate more of that. And maybe some of these artists who do this, they take the very best AI generated song using their voice and they start performing it on one of their tours or something like that. And you sort of have this interplay between AI and human.
That was the whole thing with the holograms or whatever. Dead people giving concerts, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
As
or you just put on your Apple Vision Pros and you're at the concert and
There.
it's all
Yeah,
made by AI.
And it's funny, but for some reason, right? People still want the energy of the crowd and bumping elbows.
Oh yeah. Well,
That's true.
there's all kinds of logistical hassles in going
Yeah.
to a concert, but it's definitely there's no substitute for being in that sort
Right.
of the mosh pit of the
Yeah.
that's an outdated term.
Plus,
So we should probably
you don't get to pay $35 for your parking if you're watching an Apple Vision Pro at home.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. What's next, Andy?
Yeah, so let's talk about Claude here. So Claude announced a new version of their AI, offering significant improvements in reasoning, knowledge, and coding capabilities. John, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so this is Claude from Anthropic. It's another LLM, another AI chatbot is one way to think about it. And of course, these things are just getting better and better and better over time. And I think what was surprising to some people is two things. The first is that it seems to be outperforming a lot of the other LLMs that have kind of recently been released. So ChatGPT's new one, as an example, And I guess that just wasn't really expected. This is arms race stuff. All these are just getting better and better and better and better. But the really interesting thing from my perspective is the coding side. So what they did is they integrated what's called a coding environment into their chatbot. And what does that mean? It means that you can ask Claude to create code to do something, and then actually run it right alongside the code that's been generated. Now, it seems like it would be an obvious thing for somebody to do, but up till this point, most of the other solutions have required that you take that code, copy it out of the LLM, and then put it somewhere else and run it. So among other things, what this means is you can actually see how code is performing as you're interacting directly with Claude. And there are these examples floating around right now that are crazy, where people have said something like, hey, create a chess game with graphics that I can play and then play chess against me. And Claude will actually code the whole thing, will create the images and the graphic interface for it, run it in the little integrated development environment, and let you play chess against it. And I think in that example, by the way, Claude won. So it's also very good at chess, aside from being very good at coding. Some of the examples were kind of more mundane. The one that really, really blew me away was somebody said, hey, create a very simple, minimalistic game using keyboard controls that's totally novel and involves matching colors in some way. And so a new game got created that was actually pretty interesting. The concept was that you had a Pong-like, or brick smasher-like thing moving along the bottom, but it was broken up into three colors: red, green, and blue. And then blocks would fall down, or balls would fall down, that were color coded, and you had to line up the right version of, or the right part of your paddle with the color that I've never seen anything like that before. And that was something that Claude created on the first try with that simple prompt, in a format that was completely playable, where somebody could just use their arrow keys and start playing the game. So this is pretty wild, pretty game-changing stuff.
That is pretty wild. And you can see how quickly you can develop software integrated kind of environment like that. So gone are a bunch of other developer tools, soon to be anyway, where you'll just have this as an environment where you can create software and iterate and debug, and all of these capabilities right there.
Yeah, they've also got what's called this idea of artifacts and a knowledge repository. So you can actually take an existing code base now, upload it into Claude. So, when you're writing a big program, something more complex than Pong, you're going to have a ton of different files that have code in them that all kind of interact and interrelate in some way. So you can now actually take those files and upload them into Claude, and it will actually reference all of them in giving you answers and new code. So it will know, oh, I've got this little thing that moves the paddle over in this file, and I need to reference that if I want to, move the paddle in this game. So it's really extraordinary. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is where this planning thing starts to be really interesting as well. So now you can start to see where you can say, hey, I want to create this platform, and let's start going through the steps. And it will create a spec doc, and it will use that spec doc to create a user profile document that tells you who the user is and what they're going to need it for. And then it will create an architecture, which is all of the little modules that you're going to need in order to create the project. And then it can help you write the modules one by one. So really a wild moment. I think this is taking those 10x developers and 10xing them again. We were talking about this with the music. Does this displace everybody? Does this displace developers? I think what happens is we have a 10 to 40x increase in the code that's getting created, and a 10 to 40x increase in the music that's getting created, and very soon the videos that are getting created. So,
well, that's exactly what happened with the internet, is that there were, sort of gatekeepers that, only certain people got to publish books, and certain kinds of things got made. And, in the sort of creative world, there was a whole vetting process, and it was very, very selective, or relatively selective. And then the internet came along, and suddenly everybody was a publisher, hypothetically, right. and YouTube, and so on and so forth. And so, while on the one hand, the promoters of that kind of thing say it democratizes this or that, right? Democratizes creativity, democratizes coding, which it does and is good. there's also lots of crap and lots of noise that comes out on the other side too. So
Yeah.
that's the downside of that, making those things more accessible.
Do you guys happen to know? Do you know the gray goo problem thought experiment? Is that familiar to
No,
you?
I don't. I don't.
What is
I
it?
don't.
So real briefly, like when nanotech was kind of a big deal 10 or 15 years ago, there was this sort of like dystopian, like apocalyptic scenario where if you programmed a nano machine to self-replicate and to convert everything that it found into itself, you would eventually end up with everything turning into what was called gray goo, which is basically the whole, every material in the entire world or universe being converted into a nanobot that, where its best mode for moving around is in this goo. So it's actually a real problem, and it's something like that people think about when they think about creating self-replicating machines. I think we have a gray goo of AI problem that's kind of happening here, where like at what point is there 5,000 times more content that's really, really bad and not useful to me than there is right now? And it's already pretty bad. But like, when the ratio is, let's say 5,000 or 10,000 to 1 in terms of like sludge, gray goo content and
Yep.
interesting useful content, or gray goo music and good
Yep.
music, like what happens in that environment?
You need the return of the gatekeepers, or people who are sort of editors, right? So people who can say to you, experts in different areas who can say, these are the things worth paying attention to, and the rest of it is crap. I mean,
Yeah.
why do we read, restaurant reviews? It's discovery and efficiency. I want to invest time in things that are going to be useful or interesting to me, and not invest time in things that are not going to be that way. And I mean, I think it's a problem that Google is starting to deal with. There's this sort of race against, they were racing against sort of SEO manipulation of search results, which continues to this day, or people responding to Google's incentives at least. And then now they're starting to deal with all the AI spam or stuff that is of diminished quality because it's being created in a way that sort of leverages AI to create good enough stuff. And they're trying to get ahead of that.
So who becomes the curator in this environment is the question. Is it the thumbs up button that people press when they get an answer that's right that feeds the AI, and the AI becomes the arbiter of what people like as a result of that? Or are there actually human editors that are making judgment calls along the way?
It makes human opinions and human insight and human connections more valuable. And maybe you have to pay a premium for them, or there's some higher value there. But I mean, think about word of mouth versus reading a bunch of online reviews. I mean, early on that was really valuable. Now there's like manipulation of those, and there's fraud, and you don't know if you can trust. Like you go onto Amazon, how many of those are manipulated? So I don't even look at that stuff anymore. And so you're looking for an expert who can give you the list of the best things, right? Whatever that is. Here are the best things. You're looking for trustworthy information, and I don't know who the arbiter is, but I think humans, sort of on the one hand, humans that you could trust, which is why a lot of people are defecting from Google to social media, because there's more authenticity there. There's a real person. There's a context that you can see, and you can sort of assess the trustworthiness of that information in a way that you can't with sort of documents, on the internet. But that's
the TikTok right there. That's why people love TikTok,
right.
is the
That's right.
human giving a review on something.
Yeah, and this is the algorithm selecting. Yeah, yeah, and by the way, that's just what's going to keep happening, right? So like, if you think about any form of content creation before all this stuff was going on, including before TikTok, it was actually relatively expensive to even get something to the point where you could test it with an audience, right? So it was like there was a pretty big bar for even putting content out there to start getting that feedback loop going. And as that bar goes down to the ground, like the cost of that literally starts approaching zero. This is where these algorithmically driven, like what's trending kinds of things are they're really gonna shine. You can imagine a really complete and kind of scary feedback loop, which is like, the AI can now see, well, what are the things that catch fire most quickly? Let me go build 50 more of those and test those.
But that also generates mediocrity, right? Because everybody's just
It does.
copying everybody else, The 7 things, the 5 things, the 10 things.
And presumably when people get tired of those, they stop clicking. But what does happen, the unintended effect we already know of these algorithms, is to actually push people towards more and more and more extreme content, because that more
Well,
and more
right.
extreme stuff generates more engagement. Like
That's
that's
right.
one of the features of it. So it's going to be a really interesting thing. I hope we learned our lesson with YouTube algorithms. I don't know that we did.
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
Clearly, we didn't.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about AI websites. There's some interesting things happening in this space, and a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about are broad strokes and market movement kind of things. I love the application of AI, and specifically with AI websites, because AI websites or websites in general have notoriously been very difficult to create in the past. Now with AI, there are companies like Notion, just announced Notion sites this week. Wix, Duda, Squarespace all have AI solutions. It's a really interesting way to create a website with some prompts and just give it some information about you, your business, your location, what you excel at, products and services that you want to feature, and blam, you have a website. What do you guys think about this, Greg? Why don't we lead off with you, because you're an expert in the local space.
It used to be the case that you would see these reports or press releases that say, only X% of small businesses have a website, or Y% don't have a website. And I think that those numbers, if we were to sort of check in on them today, would be smaller, meaning more people have websites. But I think it's as you say, Andy, it's still kind of difficult. I mean, when Neil and I started this dialogue program, that was a challenge we had. Like, well, how are we going to get a web presence up? And we went to a WordPress developer, and we looked at Wix, and we looked at several things, and we wound up going with Ghost, partly because I was already familiar with it, but it was just simpler. It did a bunch of stuff we needed. It was simple, and it was relatively intuitive and quick. And these AI websites, I mean, that's the promise of them, means that you can do something yourself very quickly. And I think it makes, a decent professional web presence much more available to a lot of businesses and solopreneurs. And you'll see more of them. The simplicity of creating these 1 or 2 click websites with a few prompts is getting better and better. Some of the incumbents have added AI layers. Just tell us what you do and we'll write a formal business description, or we'll write a bunch of tags for you, or whatever it is. But I think this is a next generation of website builders that are going to make, at the low end, probably more than the enterprise level, certainly, websites much more accessible and much cheaper to build. So, I mean, I think it'll be pretty useful for people.
Part of the differentiation about it is that you're not going to even know if it's AI generated.
Right. You won't.
You have no idea.
I'm really curious to see on this one. I think, Andy, you and I had the experience. Granted, it was 3 months ago, which means that may as well have been 10 decades ago, like in AI terms. But we had this experience of trying to do something like this on Wix. Now they're, to your point, Greg, one of the incumbents that's tried to layer in some generative AI stuff. And when we did it, and what we got back was like terrible. It was so bad. Like we were both scratching our heads. Like, what did we put?
You mean you were using AI, or are you using the traditional Wix product?
Their AI tool.
We're using the AI tool. Yeah. And it was so bad that we ended up saying, you know what, let's just go look at the templates, and we found some amazing templates. And so I suspect that a lot has changed even in 90 days. One of the outcomes of this, everybody needs to have a website, is there must be, I think seriously, there's probably 10 million website templates out there available. Like I don't know if that's the right order of magnitude, but it's a very, 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 very large number. And, for as many people as are using Wix, like I think it's even relatively unlikely that the one template that we chose from the Wix library is used by anybody else that we know. Like it's that big of a pool. And it just makes me wonder, like, do we really need it to generate the visuals on it, or is this really going to be better for things like site sections and the content in those, and determining what the nav items should be called and that kind of thing?
They could be trained on the templates, right?
I think that would be ideal, right? Like, so the ideal would be like, oh, I've chosen 7 different templates for you based on what you put in there that I think would be a good fit. Which one do you want to use? I think that would be a nice flow.
I think that's right. I think that's what I was going to say, is that the human mind, I think, works like, give me some options visually to go with, then start with that, and then layer on content, from there. as opposed to starting with a blank slate, enter in some information about your business. You do all of that, which is what we did on Wix, and then get a website after you just spent 20 minutes feeding it all kinds of information, and it's just a terrible outcome. And you're like, great, that was not exactly anything close to what I was looking for. I think these AI website platforms are making some strides here. I find it interesting. Notion added this into their platform so that you can create. It's sort of like Google Sites to me a little bit.
Except Google Sites is dead, essentially.
Well, it is now, but it seems like a natural extension of Notion, given that it's a team note-taking kind of platform, so that you can create a site to be able to present your ideas to the rest of the team, for example, in an organized kind of way.
Yeah.
And AI to be able to do that.
Well, it's an illustration of a broader phenomenon, I think, where you have a bunch of AI tools, sort of free-form Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini, and they do a bunch of things, and those may substitute for certain SaaS tools or certain other kinds of software applications. And then you've got the sort of incumbents that own the space or have historically owned the space, and they're adding AI in, for press release purposes and because they have to. And then you'll have this sort of generation of AI startups or AI centric, native startups that'll be cheaper and maybe more adapted to the needs of users today. I mean, CRM was an example. I mean, there was a discussion about HubSpot versus what's the name of the company that just launched? I'm blanking on it. An ex-HubSpot person is basically starting a CRM tool that's AI focused and more intuitive. And CRM, is basically a highly structured database that has stuff layered on top of it and kind of clunky in those respects. I mean, I'm not a HubSpot user, so I can't speak to it. But that's these AI websites may wind up supplanting some of the traditional vendors for certain audience segments because they're easier, they're cheaper, they're faster, more intuitive.
It does beg the question, what happens when you can create code in a tool like it's like ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of these tools, Claude, where you can do the coding in the platform itself. You can render the videos, you can create the content, you can do all of this stuff. At what point does it start to bleed into GitHub space and other applications, Adobe space, and all of these other incumbents that are out there where you create your own website, for example, if you want to do that, or a number of things, because you can just code it up right there in that environment. You can see how an environment like Claude could extend into several different software verticals and have a presence with.
Exactly.
We'll go deep into each one of those categories. And that becomes hugely disruptive to the incumbents that are in the market.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that Neil's not here because he wrote an article this past week that was kind of addressing that very point: is how are these tools going to kind of cannibalize, existing software? I mean, and Google, a high-profile example of that is Google Workspace, where they could extend what they're doing in Workspace into a couple of different areas and instantly capture, some meaningful share. But Google's problem is that they often don't follow through and don't execute on things, but that's a different conversation. But certainly the potential is there for disruption of some of these traditional SaaS companies. And that's what makes the space so interesting, is that a lot of this is really unpredictable, and how people respond will determine whether they win or lose, And
for anybody listening, if you have any ideas or any thoughts around this, please leave comments around it. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
For sure.
Yeah, who's gonna survive and who isn't in all this, right? It feels to me like Google Cloud, like most of these tools would do well to say, hey, we will just put all the code we write on Google Cloud to scale it. That seems pretty safe to be Google Cloud right now. But like Git, as you were talking about GitHub, do I really need that as my repository if I could use Claude as my repository? Now, it's more complicated than that. But yeah, there's going to be some massive disruptions, and it'd be cool to hear what people think about that.
Well, on that note, let's wrap it up. Great conversation, guys. Thank you so much. As always, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. And thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.